If you're a pet photographer and you find Photoshop a little bit overwhelming, this is the video for you. I'm Emily, a professional pet photographer and pet photography teacher from Inspiration Photography, and today I'm going to be showing you what I think are the 3 most important skills or techniques for you to be able to do pretty much anything in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. Make sure you stick around to the end of this video because I'm going to show you my favorite tool that creates pretty much 80% of the effects and edits that I do on all of my pet photos. Let's get straight into it. I've got my raw files here that I took of my boy Loki recently while we were up in the heather, and I'm going to just drag and drop this straight into Photoshop. Now if you're coming from Lightroom or Capture One or some other program, there are going to be different ways that you get your photo into Photoshop. We can just click on this and drop it down into the Photoshop menu down the bottom there. And you'll see here I have a window that's popped up, and this is Adobe Camera Raw. Now I know this is meant to be Photoshop Basics, but Camera Raw kind of comes along with Photoshop, and it's really worthwhile not ignoring this part of the process or this screen, because this is what's going to allow you to work on your raw data if you're not working directly from Lightroom first. So for me, this is super important as a way to set up our image before we take it into Photoshop properly in order to do a bunch more more dramatic edits. So from here, you can do a heap of stuff. If you're familiar with Lightroom, it's essentially the same thing, so you don't have to worry about it too much. But we can do things from here like fixing up the white balance, so my black and white dog is actually black and white. We could drop the highlights, we could pop the shadows up a little bit. Let's check to make sure he's actually looking black and white. Yeah, he's not too bad. We've got a couple of blue spots, but we can fix them selectively. It has basically all of the other Lightroom functions that you might want, and of course my favorite thing is going to be the masking tools that you can find up here. So we could, for example, grab a radial filter, pop it over his little face. From here we could give him a bit more clarity, give him a little bit more texture, just sharpen up his face. We could do this with his eyes as well, work on them individually. We could do things like make a new radial. I really like working in radials, by the way. If you haven't seen my video with behind the scenes from when I went and did the photo shoot in the heather with the sun rays, there's an editing tutorial at the end of that one where I show you a bunch of ways we can use radial filters. So this little patch up here is a bit blue, so we could add some yellow to cancel out the blue, or we could just desaturate it since he's black and white. So also got some blue in his nose, so we could add another radial to there, or of course you could just use the brush and paint all of the blue parts if you feel that that is faster for you. But basically there is a heap of stuff that you can do in Adobe Camera Raw to set your photo up. Use all of that raw data. So if you're working with an underexposed photo, you can bring up the exposure, get some more detail in the shadows and all that kind of thing because you're working with raw data. Once you have your photo looking kind of how you want it to look, instead of just hitting open, I would come down here and click this little arrow and go to open as object. I'm going to show you why. This is also why I work as a smart object from Lightroom to Photoshop as well. So go ahead and click open as object. I don't know why, but when I'm doing YouTube videos, I speak super fast, so do feel free to slow me down if I'm going too quickly. Right, so we now have the photo in Photoshop itself. You'll see at the top I have a bunch of tabs of photos that I really need to save and close, but hashtag ADHD, that's just how it goes. Here is my layer of my image layer here. And you can see this funky little symbol at the side. That's telling me it's a smart object. But Em, why do you like smart objects? This is why. And this is also applicable if you're coming from Lightroom to Photoshop and you've opened it as a smart object. If at some point in the process I want to go back and change one of my masks or get a bit more detail out of the smart object, out of the raw file, I can just double click on this thumbnail here. And can you see all of my adjustments that I just did with you guys? Getting rid of the blue, putting some texture and clarity on his face. Any masks that I've done in Lightroom or in Camera Raw would be here. And I could come back in here and change them, fix them, make them different, whatever, and it means that I don't have to, for example, if I've been editing and I make something a bit too light, I raise the shadows too much, and then I'm like, oh no, that looks stupid, I've made it too light. I don't have to then add another layer to darken it. I can just undo the edit that I did before. So I'm not like constantly canceling out my own edits if I change my mind, which I do a lot. So this means that I can come back and work at that very base level most of the time. That is my first thing, is working in Camera Raw to get a really nice base image. I could have done a heap more work in Camera Raw than I did here, but this is not a tutorial. It's about my favorite tools. So work in Camera Raw, get a really nice base image, and then open it up as a smart object. So my second tip is all about layers and masking. Masking is at the base of everything that you can do in Photoshop, and it is the most important part. If you can understand masking, you will be able to do 90% of everything in Photoshop. A few people and a few of my students that I've taught in the past have been a little bit traumatized by trying to understand Photoshop and the black and the white and what is this and what is this. So I'm going to give you my favorite analogy. Let me just grab one more layer and I'm going to put it in here as if we're doing some kind of head swap, as if I wanted to make this into a group photo. Give me 2 seconds. So if you're looking over here in your layers panel, I now have one photo of Loki underneath and a photo of Journey on top. Now these photos weren't taken to become a group shot. We're just using it as a little bit of an example. So what I want to do is to mask Journey into this photo. Now I think this is where people get a little bit freaked out because you hear masking and it's like this is a strange term, but basically all we're going to be doing is showing or hiding part of a layer. And I want you to think of it like this, because we're going to be using either a white brush or a black brush, and we're going to have a white thumbnail or a black thumbnail. So here's my favorite analogy. I'm just going to show this layer of Journey, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to pop a layer mask on there. I don't want you to worry too much about that right now, but for future, this is where we're going to find it down the bottom. Here we have this white thumbnail. I want you to imagine that you're walking into a room and all of the lights in the room are on. You can see if there's wallpaper on the walls and what color the wallpaper is, and you can see if there's artwork on the walls or if there's any decorations or whatever. But if somebody were to turn the lights out, so now you can see my thumbnail, I just did a little keyboard shortcut, don't worry about it just yet. If somebody were to turn the lights out and the room was black, you would no longer be able to see if there was any wallpaper, what color the wallpaper was, who was in the room, what was in the room, or whatever. If somebody decided to turn on a light somewhere in the room, lights are usually white, then you could see what was in that part of the room, but maybe not some other part of the room, because that part of the room might still be too dark. Have a look at my thumbnail down here right now. All I just did was painted with white. I turned on a light where Journey was, and the rest of the room is still black. Okay? So this is, for me, the easiest way that I can kind of explain masking. When we're painting with black, or when the thumbnail is black, the lights are off in the room. The effect, or the picture, or the layer, or whatever it is still there. It's just that the lights are out and we can't see it right now until we take a brush tool from over here. I have a soft brush, I have it on a low flow, probably go a little bit higher, and I'm going to be painting with white. You can change the colors here by clicking these arrows or just hit X on your keyboard to flick back and forth. But as soon as I paint with white, anywhere that I paint is going to show that image layer in that, from that thumbnail, from that layer. Okay, as soon as you understand this concept, everything kind of hinges around masking exactly like this in Photoshop. So let's have a go. I just did undo. I'm going to delete this layer mask so we can just apply it again. So now all we can see is this photo of Journey because there's no mask, there's no black, everything is just there, and we can't even paint right now because we don't have a layer mask to paint on. So if you're trying to bring two images together, or you're wanting to merge something or put a hat on him or whatever you want to do, you're going to need a layer mask. The really cool thing about masking is that I'm not erasing parts of this image. I'm not going to get 3 hours down the line, save my work, come back tomorrow, and then realize I made a really big error and I've erased the pixels and I can't get them back. It's never gone, it's just hidden. So everything is totally flexible and you can come back tomorrow and all of your pixels are still there, they're just hidden with the black, okay? So down here is our Add Layer Mask button. We can click that and we'll get our white thumbnail. So if I decided that I wanted to hide part of this image now, and I was painting in white, nothing would happen. It's all white, all the lights in the room are on. I can't turn on more lights when there's already lights, right? And remember, this doesn't have anything to do with how light or dark your image is. All it has to do with is what's being shown and what's being hidden. So if I hit X on my keyboard, I'm now on the black brush and I can turn some lights off. So I'm hiding whatever is in this top layer wherever I paint black. So this is actually kind of a neat way that I could bring in a little bit of this sort of heather around him. I could maybe bring it in over here. Look, now I have a bit more heather. I don't even have to show Loki if I don't want to. I could just kind of paint around Journey to give this a little bit more depth. So you can really easily bring two photos together. Now, if I decided that I did want to show both dogs, I could come to the Move tool and maybe just move Journey aside. Now you can see I had a bit of a problem here because it's moved my whole mask, but that's okay, we can fix that up in a second. So now half of Loki is covered. I'm going to need to hide more of my Journey layer so that we can see Loki underneath, right? We're going to be painting with black. Have a look here on the thumbnail. We're going to be painting with black to hide that part of Journey's photo. So we're turning off all the lights along the edge because we don't need to see the edge here. And down the bottom. Okay, I have a bit of a gap down the bottom there, but that's not important right now. All we want to do is just show Loki. Maybe we can kind of merge them in together. Now remember, this is a really, really quick job. You guys can be a little bit more careful than me. And okay, there's a couple of depth of field issues here. It's not the best example of bringing two photos together, but we've done it. We have now one photo of Loki and Journey together in one scene, and I could play around with this and try and fix it a little bit. It's a bit hard, Journey's a bit further forward. Maybe I could change the size of him. I don't know, that's not important. The main thing is we painted with black to hide parts of Journey's image so that we could see Loki coming through underneath. Just remember that room analogy. If you're turning lights off, you're hiding the wallpaper, you're hiding the stuff on the walls. In a minute, we're going to be rehearsing this a little bit more by using effects rather than another image layer. If you're enjoying my pet photography tips and tricks, if you're learning something new about Photoshop today, or maybe just reinforcing something that you already know, make sure you hit like and subscribe, ring the bell, I don't know, the whole thing. Because there's plenty more pet photography coming your way, and I would love to hear your thoughts and ideas about what you would like videos on in the future. So let's get into the next fundamental skill for Photoshop, and that is going to be adjustment layers. And this is going to be working really, really closely with this idea of masking, so you get to practice that a heap more just now. I'm going to come over here and just click the little eye icon so I can hide Journey. I don't need him anymore. If I wanted to leave him there, I could for this. It doesn't matter. I just don't want to complicate everything. I'm going to come down to this little bottom menu here. We do a lot of stuff down here. These tools are actually really useful, except maybe this FX button. I don't think I've ever used that one, but this little half circle is super, super important. So click on that and you will see a bunch of effects that we can use. These are going to create new layers. They're adjustment layers and they make different effects. Some will work with light, some will work with color, some will like add some blurry haze somewhere. Basically, everything I do to make an effect on my photo is done using an adjustment layer. So let's say we want to change the color of the heather in the foreground here and we want to give it a little bit more blue magenta tint. There of course are a couple of options, but for today I just want to grab the color balance tool. So go ahead and click that one. You'll see now we get a new layer here and our thumbnail is white. Of course nothing's happening because we haven't told it to make an effect yet, so it's just sitting there doing nothing. But as soon as I slide one of these sliders, you'll see how everything gets really blue. Or maybe we can make it really pink. And I'm kind of making it a little bit extreme for you guys so you can see the effect really clearly. Now, obviously, I assume I don't want Loki to be purple, and the background probably also doesn't need to be purple. The main thing that I want to make more purple is the heather in the foreground. So I have two options here. Using my black brush and just making it big and painting everywhere that I don't want to be purple. Okay, it doesn't take that long, but it's a little bit slow and tedious, right? I have to go over everything, make sure everything is unpurpled, and then I end up with something like that. It works, it's fine, but I'd say that there is a quicker option. So I'm just gonna hold Command or Control and delete, and that's gonna delete my layer mask that I just made. Back to my white layer mask, have a look at our thumbnail over here, completely white again. You can see our effect is everything. All the lights in the room are on. Instead of hiding all the parts that I don't want to see, in this case, I think it makes more sense to show the parts that I do want to see. In order to do that, I need to start with a black thumbnail, a black layer mask over here so that everything's hidden, and I can just say to Photoshop, hey, I just want this part to be purple. In order to do that, on my keyboard, I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Command or Control and I to invert. Command or Control I to invert. The effect has disappeared, but remember, it's still there. It's just all the lights have been turned off. We cannot see that the wallpaper is purple right now. Have a look at our layer thumbnail. You'll see it's black. Now, if I try and color in with my black brush, nothing's going to happen. It's black, right? We can't paint black on black, it's already black. So X on my keyboard to flip to the white brush, and then I can just paint in wherever I want it to be, this sort of purpley blue color. And then I'm not erasing my whole image. I'm just saying, I want these parts to be purple. And if there were really small parts, like if I just wanted these leaves to be purple for some reason, then I could just paint in up there as well using my white brush. And pretty much you can go on and do as many of these adjustment layers doing as many different effects as you want. For example, maybe I want to do some cool gradient effect, like putting some kind of fake sun behind Loki. So we can grab our gradient tool, we can click on the color here, maybe make it a different color, maybe make it fade out a little bit softer, whatever you want. You can change the style. This isn't a lesson on making gradients, so we're not going to spend too long doing this. Just remember that there is only one sun in the world, so you probably don't necessarily want two suns if you've already got the sun in your photo. Have a look here, we have got everything is white, we can see the effect. It is currently going over Loki's head now. It could be a stylistic decision, but I'm not such a fan. So I'm gonna hit X to flip to my black brush over here, and then I could just paint out Loki. Now there are more specific ways to mask out your subject, but I think that that is a lesson for another day, because all I wanted to look at today was adjustment layers and masking, and hopefully feeling a little bit more confident about it. And okay, that was a pretty quick job, and now we could turn down the exposure if we wanted, just to soften that right up. And I've got a little bit of a pop of warmth behind Loki there, and all I did was to paint in his ears with my black brush. If you want to see where you've painted just like I just did, it is the slash key that goes that way. And then you can see exactly where you've been masking. So now for my very, very favorite tool, and this is how I get a heap of the effects in my images, particularly when it comes to getting deep, rich colors, shaping the light, creating a mood, pretty much everything. It's another adjustment layer. So down here in the adjustment layers panel, we're going to grab curves layers. This tool is basically a histogram, and you can do so much with it. You can see that as soon as I drag the curve down, look at our colors in the background now. And you can see that this is almost already looking like one of my photos, except that Loki's quite dark. So I could go ahead and mask Loki out with my black brush really quickly. So have a look at those colors in the background now. They've gone from really soft pastel colors to super deep, rich colors. You can also use curves layers for things like a bit of a vignette. So Command or Control and I, because I just want to paint this in wherever I want it right now. So maybe underneath this heather, maybe in this sort of background a little bit. We can also use curves layers to make a spotlight. So another curves layer. I'm going to drag it up this time. You can see this makes everything lighter. If I don't want his blacks to get so light, I could put a point here and just keep it a little bit less light. Again, Command or Control and I to invert the layer so I can paint this in exactly where I want it. Just a bit of light touching the top of his head, top of his eye, and I don't want to lighten up those light spots in the background. That is all done just through masking. So if you can understand masking, and I think that that is the most important thing for Photoshop, then you can for sure be doing edits. Basically any of my edits you'll be able to do because I just keep adding adjustment layers until I get the effects I want. Have a look at how simple of an edit this was. But already we've made a huge change to the mood of the photo, the colors that are in the photo, the way that the light is working, and all it is playing with either black or white, either showing or hiding effects. So don't be afraid to play with curves layers. They seem really complicated if you put 10,000 points on here, but you saw from this video that I used just 1 or 2 points in every single one of them. So I hope you found this really useful. If you want to know more about editing, I have an editing webinar coming up at the beginning of December. If you're watching this after the beginning of December, I also have editing courses and I do editing lessons online. So definitely check out the link below to go to my website for all the information on that. Otherwise, I hope you've learned something new and interesting about Photoshop today. And just remember that when you're playing with Photoshop, nothing can really go wrong. Like if you do something weird and it kind of all goes weird, Command or Control Z is a really great keyboard shortcut to undo something. Or often it's just that you've pressed a keyboard shortcut somewhere along the way and you just have to figure out which one it is. Nothing in Photoshop is usually permanently broken, so don't panic, just have a play. Anything can be undone, and especially if you're working with adjustment layers, it's all just adding layers and masking things in and out. So feel free to play, experiment, and have fun.